Hello everyone and welcome to Booked Solid. We are your host. I'm India.
And I'm Soraya, and it feels really, really good to finally say those words again. I'm sure you've all noticed that we have been on hiatus. Our episode on Rebecca was the end of season 1, and we are incredibly excited to be back with season 2.
Yes, we are back, y'all. And for today's episode, we are going to be covering The Queen's Gambit by Walter Tevis, both the book and the highly raved about Netflix show.
Yes, I'm so excited. Okay, because I feel like I know we have a lot to say, and the world obviously does.
Spoiler alert. Hey guys, just as a heads up, we will be revealing spoilers in this episode. If you haven't yet read the book or seen the show or film, this is a courteous reminder to proceed with caution.
So, diving into The Queen's Gambit, what were your initial thoughts on either the show or the book?
Well, I know we were kind of talking about, we always do this, and we always say this, but before we started recording, as you guys probably tell, we talk, we're friends.
And we're always like, we're not going to talk because we're going to save it for the show. And then, yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about it, and I realized that I had a lot of different, I had different reactions to both the book and the show, and we talked about this as well, but I watched the show first and then I read the book, but usually I prefer to do it the other way, so I'll read the book first and then watch either the show or the film. But I felt like after I watched the show, which I really enjoyed for the most part, I was raving about it, I was asking coworkers about it, I was, talking to you guys about it, and then I read the book and I had a different experience with the material. Then I started to see some stuff online, and my opinions have shifted overall, and I don't know, sometimes I'll watch movies or shows, and I have this thing where I'm if I just cut my brain off, I really liked it. So if I'm not thinking critically about whatever, media I'm engaging in or literature, then I'm this is great on the surface, this is interesting, and I still do think the story is interesting. But there's I have some bones to pick.
Yeah, I totally agree. And same thing, I watched the show first and read the book, which is, like India said, highly irregular. If I know something has a book, I'm going to, read that before watching the show or movie. But I actually had no idea that this was a book. And so the reason I saw the show on Netflix, obviously, and I was kind of intrigued just from the picture. But I was like, I don't know. And then everyone started talking about it, and then my boyfriend started watching it, and I was like, all right. So I started, and I kind of had the similar feeling, so when Hamilton was sweeping the nation when it first started, I had no idea what Hamilton was about. I had only heard the name, and yes, that is Alexander Hamilton's last name, but I didn't put two and two together, okay? Hamilton could be a lot of things. And so one of my friends was like, you have to listen to the soundtrack, and I was like, okay, well, what is it even about? And they're like, oh, it's Alexander Hamilton. I was like, you mean to tell me the world is falling apart over a musical about Alexander Hamilton? I just was like, how good could it possibly be? Boy, was I wrong. It's amazing. We all know that now. But same thing with Queen's Gambit. I was kind of like, well, how interesting could a show about chess really be? And again, I was wrong. But so like you were saying, when I first watched the show, I thought it was amazing. I was in the same boat as everybody else. And we're going to get into it. There's so much that I love about the show, and I know we talked about this a little bit off air, but if it was just the show, I think I would still be in that place. There are a few things, that we can get into that, maybe could have been different, but for the most part, still loved it. But now after reading the book, this might be too soon to say at the top of the episode, but I feel like I can say with pretty much certainty that I liked the show far better than the book.
I definitely want to second that. I completely agree. And it's a weird feeling because before, I know we normally are I don't know, with normal people, and, but it's pretty apparent with this one, at least for me, that the show is better, or maybe it just executes certain themes better, or for whatever reason I took to it better. And I will say this is just embarrassing, but I'm gonna say it because I've already started speaking, but I genuinely, I've never played a single game of chess in my entire life. I don't know very much about it at all, and I think for me, that's one of the reasons why the show probably worked better. And I know what you're thinking, like, girl, just read about it, play a game.
I'm not thinking that at all because chess is so hard. You go ahead and I'll tell you how I feel about chess.
So yeah, like I don't know anything about chess. And so, you know, certain chapters, like there was one point when I was reading it, maybe three quarters of the way in, where I was just like, this is quite literally a foreign language. I don't understand at all. Like, I don't know at all what's going on. But using context clues, you know, I can intuit that some good things are happening for Beth or some bad things are happening and that this move is harmful. And I understand the concept of defense and offense. So, you know, like that made sense. But like the technical jargon definitely like took me out in the book, whereas in the show it's different seeing it visually, you know?
I totally agree, and I think that's where the beauty of the show comes in, because it makes it more, I guess, accessible, because I'm gonna say, like, so okay, I know how to play chess. I've played, you know, casually with like my family or friends. Embarrassingly, no, not even embarrassingly, I'll own it, I was in chess club in elementary school, but I think that was more so I could hang out with my best friend after school instead of having to go straight home. But I still don't, like, I know how to play the game on the most basic level. So all the terminology that they're using in the book, I have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. So I was like, don't let that make you feel like any kind of which way, because I think that was, like you were saying, it really took me out of it for some parts because it was so technical. And while I think that's really, it reflects a lot on the author to have that kind of capacity to write about it in that way is amazing. But especially because I read it and listened to it on audiobook, and so some of those parts I low-key be zoning out because I'm like, I don't really know what's going on. I'm confused, and like you said, context clues, I can, you know, tell whether it's going well or poorly for Beth, but I certainly don't understand chess on that level. And if I'm being honest, I don't really like playing chess. It is like, games with that level of strategy just aren't my thing. It's tiring, it's mentally taxing, like it's just not the kind of game I like to relax to. So I'd be more than happy to play a game of chess with you one day if you wanted. But yeah, it's definitely not like something I would consider like a hobby or something I even enjoy all that much.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know, like I never thought about it until, you know, the show and everyone's talking about it, and I was working at a bookstore for a small period of time, and like they have chessboards there, so people are buying them, and I'm like, chess, like what is this mythical game? But like, I don't know, I think that speaks to also some of the brilliance of the show, because I'm like, you've got so many people to be passionate and engaged, right? And I've never played a game, you know, I said that, so yeah. But just kind of segueing a little bit, I want to get your thoughts on this whole idea of Beth being like a child prodigy and just like how that plays out in the book and the show.
Yeah, so I think we're always kind of fascinated by these stories, like just the things that being able to accomplish so much at such a young age or having this kind of intellectual capacity is so incredible. And I did find it interesting that this was a book about a young girl, you know, in this space. I will get into this. Certain ways they approach her being a girl in this game with so many men, I didn't really agree with. Yeah, we'll get into that. So I did appreciate that it seemed to be a different story, at least, you know, in that regard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a lot of nuance to it. You know, on one end, it's about a kid, very young, lots of talent, dealing with all these adults. And, you know, for the most part, literally every single person she's around is older than her. Like, Beth is not around people her age. And as a result, she's exposed to a lot of stuff early on. And I think it's interesting how this idea of like being a child prodigy and then also like dealing with addiction and substance abuse as a means of coping, how those kind of intersect. But yeah, like it was just harrowing at some points. Like, oh my goodness, that's another thing. I'm sure we'll probably say this again, but I felt like the books and the show's interpretation of the book was spot on in many instances. Like, it's commendable, honestly. They didn't miss a beat, and if they did, I felt like it was, and we talked about this in the episode where we interviewed Julia Walton, like, sometimes things just don't translate on the script or on the book as they do on the screen. And so I would argue that a lot of the changes made in the show were made to advance the story in a different way visually as opposed to on the book, you know?
Yeah.
If that makes sense?
No, I highly agree. I actually wrote that in my notes, that exact thing, is that I feel like any of the changes they did make, which were pretty few, I would say, were completely necessary and made the show better, which is a rarity in the world of adaptations. And so, like, something I wrote down that they really nailed in the show specifically was kind of Beth's inner dialogue. So, you know, obviously the book is written from her perspective, and so there's a lot going on in her head during matches and things like that I'm kind of like, yeah, you know, how would you translate that to the screen? And they did an amazing job. So it either to tell us exactly what she was thinking at any given moment, they kind of utilized announcers or her retelling the story to somebody else, or just other creative ways of giving us the exact same feelings I got reading the book, knowing what she was feeling, but not having her just like stand there and say it, or having her in her mind thinking it, you know? Yeah, so that was something I really appreciated. I thought they did a really good job with that.
Yeah, I agree. And like, kind of to that point, this might be a bold claim. I'm just gonna say it and see if it's true to like what I believe. But I think that this show might be one of the best, at least modern takes or modern episodes, contemporary, current episodes that I've seen in which the casting for an adaptation is almost spot on.
Yeah.
And I know that I read the show first and then I read the book, but based off of the character descriptions in the book, I felt like, and yes, in the book, Beth is a brunette, I believe, and then in the show, but I watched a behind the scenes little documentary about the making of the show, and they explained that they wanted Beth to be a redhead to like kind of play on this idea of her being super unique and kind of feeling like, I guess, an outsider, so to speak, or just like, she's like, you know, the light bulb in the room. She stands out kind of thing. Yeah.
And even so, like, her hair color, we can let that slide, you know?
Right. But I just mean, like, the performances and the casting, and even, like, Mrs. Wheatley, like...
Yeah, perfect.
Benny. Perfect. Beltic.
Yeah. It was funny because we were watching it, and I was like, is that Dudley from Harry Potter?
Yeah.
It is.
And I was like, Newt from
oh my gosh, yeah.
Amazing.
He doesn't age.
He does not. He's been the same age for at least about 10, 20 years now. But yeah, that was really a treat. Like, I'm trying to think, almost even like smaller characters, just bringing, it was just, seeing this world come to life. You talked about this before we started recording, but like the costume design, I loved the outfits.
Yes, she was, and I understand we're supposed to, and I know we kind of want to talk about Beth, so we can, you know, use this is kind of my feelings about her, part of them. I know we're supposed to see her transition from this kind of awkward, shy, introverted girl into this very kind of like self-possessed, confident woman. I feel like it's kind of the evolution of her, and they did a good job with that in her wardrobe, I would say. And yeah, she was just like the picture of elegance and grace. Like, by the time she was competing, when was I'm trying to remember, there was a specific moment when I was like, oh wow, I can't remember, let's call it maybe it was when we went to Las Vegas. It was maybe the first time I was like, wow, they've really got her like wardrobe and stuff down. But yeah, so just seeing, or even like her outfit when she went to the apple pie meeting, like, yeah guys, I spent a lot of time looking at her clothes, okay, they were tailored to perfection, but yeah, she just became so elegant.
Yeah, no, I have to agree. And something that, I don't know, okay, because I felt one way when I saw it on the show, but then I saw, like, I think someone was tweeting about it, and I started to think about it a different way. But there's that point where it's, you know, she's gotten older, and she starts to, like, this is after Mrs. Wheatley, her adopted mother, has passed away. She starts to heavily abuse alcohol and the tranquilizer pills. And so she's kind of, like, hit a rock bottom, so to speak. But at one point she's in her living room and she has a TV on and she sees like this, I think like British pop icon, and in this moment she's like, yep, I love her outfit, love her wardrobe. And so there's this shift and she starts wearing kind of like, I guess I would describe it as like a retro, but her makeup is really the standout, the eyeliner.
Yes.
It's giving very much Twiggy, and it was really interesting to see that. And it was just fun, like visually in terms of the show. I thought that was interesting, but to critique that, the tweet, to just kind of sum up the gist of it, they were saying, okay, so, you know, like, does that really make sense? Like, in the book, it's talked about at length, that, you know, she can barely move. She thought at one point she needed to call for help, go to the doctor immediately. She's physically ill. She's sick to her stomach. And they're like, so now suddenly, like, when does she go shopping to get this new shift in wardrobe? Then she can barely, you know, walk and talk, and she's like breaking things, but then she like perfectly is doing her makeup. But maybe, I don't know, as I'm talking about it, maybe that's to challenge the notion, because another tweet was talking about how a lot of times male authors depict women at their rock bottom in this very like stereotypical tropey kind of way, where it's just like, you know, immediately they start drinking, and it's just like, it's the same thing like we've seen this time and time again kind of thing. That's what the tweet was saying. So maybe that was a way to challenge that, because rock bottom can look different.
That's true.
You know, and a lot of people, like, I remember, I have like this weird thing. Sometimes when, this is pre-COVID, y'all, pre-COVID, very much pre-COVID-19 pandemic. But like, if I had like a small cold or allergies, or I just wasn't feeling myself, I would like dress up. This was also when I was still in school. And so one day I like dressed up after, apparently I must have been looking horrible leading up to that. Because one of my friends was like, oh wow, you're looking good. Like, I like your outfit today. And I told him, I was just like, yeah, I mean, I do this thing where it's, I guess, mentally to psych myself out. So it's just like, I'm not both feeling bad and quote unquote looking bad. I can say, well, at least
there's something you can control.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's about. It's about control for me. But I do that when I'm at a rock bottom, so to speak. So it's like, you know, rock bottom does look differently. So maybe that's why in the show, they're like, she can slay her eyeliner, but also she's going through it. But that's
a good point.
You know,
yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Something too, I just want to say real quick, because I know we're probably going to move on more into like Beth and her character. We're talking about the wardrobe, but also can we talk about the set design?
Yes.
They did such an amazing job of making it look like the era it was supposed to be. Like, I just thought when she was in Vegas, or even when she was in Paris, I was like, wow, they just did an amazing job.
I agree. Like, it's remarkable. And also, like, the color palette, the way that the show is even color corrected, these tones, it was so cohesive and so believable. Like, I really bought that we're in this time period, and that, you know, it was interesting. It was fascinating. Like, this game of chess that I know nothing about. I'm hooked. I'm watching. I remember I had work the next day. It was like, I don't know, 1 a.m. I'm like, okay, I have to at least start the next episode. You know, and like, even reading the book, you know, when they're talking about pawn to bishop 4, like all this, you know, my mind was blank. But, you know, it's still, yeah, I was buying this world that was created for sure. But just kind of like moving into her character, I guess, do you want to just talk about a little bit more about like her childhood and how she was during that time?
Yeah, so the book and the show did approach it differently. She still went to Methuen in both the book and the show, but the show kind of gave her more of a backstory with her mom. Like, the show just said her mom passed in an accident, and that was that, and they didn't really talk about her dad. Whereas we know the show, it gave more of a backstory that, like, her parents' relationship and the things that her mom was going through, and then it showed that the accident was actually intentional, and so it just created, I guess, more of, I don't want to say more trauma, because I feel like trauma is trauma, and like what she went through in the book and the show both are still incredibly difficult, but it did add more to her story and like things she was trying to work through as an adult. Really quick, I'm going to take this moment to say that the actress who played young Beth also deserves a shout out, because she did an amazing job as well.
Yes. So. I'm so glad that you said that. I was just floored with her performance, and I thought the transition between, you know, younger Beth and adult Beth, flawless. But I do want to say, so the role of Mr. Scheibel, and like, of course, you know, as we all know, he's the reason why she learns about chess, and he kind of takes a chance on her, even though women don't play chess.
I was so tired of hearing that line. And what was refreshing was, like, even Beth was. Mm-hmm. She was like, my gender should not be the most important thing about my ability to play the game. Like, that first article that was done about her, she said they spent most of it talking about the fact that she's a woman. And it is irrelevant. Mm-hmm. Like, we can talk about her skill in the game because it doesn't matter. She's beating men and women. So, like, why are we stuck on that, you know?
Right. I agree. And yeah, so I was kind of annoyed with him at first, but I felt like he was instrumental and just so, like, his role, I don't know, because Methuen was very not it. Like, tranquilizers, giving kids tranquilizers. What?
How was that even possible?
Yeah.
And then when okay, you got these kids hooked on tranquilizers. You've been giving it to them for months, years, probably. You cannot just quit cold turkey one day, like, they're not getting them anymore. Like, they needed to have some kind of system in place, like, weaning them off and then providing, like, maybe this is, like, too much to ask for this, for them, but to have something where they can seek help if they need it. Like, they should have known there would be withdrawal symptoms, and and I think honestly the whole depiction of Methuen and even the issues with the tranquilizer situation, it does kind of speak to, you know, just in our society, kids who have become orphaned or, you know, are in the adoption system in general, foster care, like, sometimes, like, not sometimes, there's blatant mistreatment of them, and it's disgusting and it's horrifying, frankly. But with that, I think Beth, she's kind of like on her own. She's trying to find kind of, I keep recalling Dexter lately. I didn't even know why. I guess because the new show, or the new season's coming out soon. The show, for those who don't know, and I believe it's also an entire series as well. Yeah. But one thing with Dexter, without spoiling anything, is just like, it's the best show in the universe.
That. But also, like, this idea of having a strong code or a moral code, it's, you know, what he lives by. And I feel like Beth is trying to come up with her own code and, okay, how do I navigate the world and what's right and what's wrong? And I felt like Scheibel was key in that he was kind of like a disciplinary figure in her, but he was able to get through to her because of chess. Yeah. And so, like, she thought he was cool, even though he's just like this introverted, shy older man, and she's like, okay, but he's the chess guru, like, he's gonna teach me everything, and she always was like, he's hiding secrets, like, why can't he share everything he knows with me? But you know, when she started to act out and was maybe being rude or just impatient, what did he do? He locked the door, and he's like, no, we're not playing chess, like, you can't, that type of behavior isn't acceptable. Yeah, I think what I liked about, like, he wasn't warm and fuzzy. And I liked that he wasn't warm and fuzzy because I feel like he taught her the discipline that is required to play the game of chess. Exactly. You know? And yeah, he put his foot down, he was stern, but then he also could recognize her talent and didn't try to stifle it. Like, bringing in Mr. Gans and trying to, like, help her like, he knew that he wasn't gonna be enough, or like she had far surpassed him at that point. And, you know, just you could tell he genuinely had her best chess interest at heart. Yeah, and I think his just, you know, seeing her and working through chess with her, that helped her to become more tactful and organized. And yeah, that's an interesting thing that you brought up with, like, the parallels of in real life and just on the board, like, because, you know, she's a kid. She's literally 8 years old. Yeah. So she's going to want, like, she was throwing tantrums, essentially, because she's like, at certain points, he'd be like, or he taught her this idea that, and again, you know, we all know I don't know much about chess, but kind of like, I guess withdrawing. Yeah. So, like, when you know you're about to lose, basically, you don't keep trying, like, you've lost kind of thing. So he taught her that principle, and she was really heated. She was upset. She's like, this is dumb. I can beat you. Like, no, I can get out of this. And he's like, no, like, there's a certain decorum and there's a way that you go about this. And I really enjoyed that with young Beth. But something else that I want to talk about that was just extremely upsetting. So in young Beth's life at Methuen, she meets Jolene. And Jolene is, I believe, the only black character in the entire show and book, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I feel like, well, Ferguson in the...
Oh, yeah, that's right.
In the book, that I don't think Ferguson is white. I mean, I don't think he's black, but in the show, he is.
Yeah. But one thing that was really just upsetting, or it's always going to be upsetting, I'm always going to be talking about and thinking about and looking at representation in shows. And so the fact that she's one of the few black characters in the series, the way that she's depicted, in my opinion, completely missed the mark. But in the book specifically, in the first few chapters, there's an instance in which Jolene sexually assaults Beth late at night while they're in the orphanage. And like, honestly, at this point, I believe it was like the first 4 chapters, I would say. I wanted to stop reading it. I was completely appalled, disgusted, and just thrown because, you know, I had watched the show. So like, this wasn't in the show. Thank God. I'm so glad that they didn't put that in the show. But it's just like, we were talking about this before we started recording, but, you know, of course there's going to be issues with sexual assault and just, you know, horrible things that happen to people, and they're going to be talked about in media and literature. However, it's got to serve a purpose, right? It's got to advance the story. It's got to speak to the characters. This did nothing.
Or open the door for some kind of conversation, productive conversation surrounding the topic.
Right. This did absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
All it did was, you know, hypersexualize some kids, which again, Walter Tevis, the author, he's a male. We're talking about an 8-year-old and I believe she was like 14.
I think she was actually 12.
Or 12.
Because I think she was only 4 years older than Beth.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, I like you, we've said this at the top of the episode, we watched the show first. And so I mentioned I read the book and was listening to it on audio. So I'm listening to it and that scene happens and I was just disgusted. Like, my jaw hit the floor, and like you, I was like, I don't even want to hear this. I want to skip over it. I don't understand what this serves to the rest of the story. It was just so highly unnecessary. And like you were saying, like, this author is a grown man. Why are you writing about this happening between 2 young girls for no reason? And it was just appalling. And yeah, it was just something I cannot at all figure out why it was necessary to be kept in, why it was put in the first place. And I'm also just incredibly glad that it wasn't in the show, because, and it doesn't make sense for so many reasons, like for that to happen and then Jolene and Beth just become super close good friends anyway. Like they never talk about it again, and it was very, and it's so out of place with the tone of the rest of the story. So yeah, it was, you know, the only thing I could try to see or work through why it was there is to, I guess, speak to their age difference, and that Jolene was older and that Beth was looking, but no, it doesn't, because that doesn't make sense. But just segueing into that, Jolene was older, and so I guess in a way Beth looked up to her and learned things from her. But and like, I guess there's this whole thing with like Beth just trying to understand sexuality in like her biology class or something, and even in the show it kind of comes up. But I want to say that too, because I even wrote in my notes, I think, let me see if I can find it. I said, why is there such an emphasis on sexuality for her young age?
Yeah,
I don't have a problem with sexuality, I don't have a problem with exploring sexuality, but she's 8. You know, to me there were a lot of instances, especially early on at this point in the book, where she's still 8 and 9, where just there was a lot of sexuality. We're talking about the incident with Jolene. We're talking about some of the conversations they have, some of the things that she's trying to think about and look up on her own. It's like, she's 8 years old. I would have had no issue if these things came up later, like at the age people start exploring their sexuality or questioning it more. That makes perfect sense. Not the Jolene thing. Definitely, that had no place at all in the story ever. But just some of the other things that happen, I think they would have been fine later on in the story. It was just weird to me that at age 8, this is what he's having her think about so much. Exactly.
I completely agree. And the thought of a grown man sitting down and writing about some kids, some small children who are girls exploring their sexuality, it disgusts me, frankly. You know, I don't know. This could be an agree to disagree moment with other people, but for me, I've never been a fan of just, you know, sex and like kids being brought up in the media just for the sake of just exploring their sexuality at that age. She's 8 years old.
Exactly.
And 12. When I was 8, you know.
I had my Polly Pocket.
Yeah.
It's reminding me of, I never read it, but people told me about what happens in it. That's another, if you don't know, you can look it up. I'm not going to repeat it here. It's disgusting. But to me, I'm like, how did that even make it to print?
Right.
Why on earth would that be in the story? In the book. It's not in the movie. Or in either movie. But yeah, so.
Exactly. And so, yeah, that was a really big deterrent for me. I didn't understand it. And, you know, we can maybe dissect this further later, but in general, just like the predatory nature and overtones in both the book and the show, it's frankly unacceptable. Like, as we talked about, Beth, everyone around Beth is older than her. Every single guy that she later would have sex with is older than her. And like, specifically, these are guys in many instances that she's meeting at tournaments when she's a child or a teenager. And then they later in life, a couple years later, oh, you've grown up and you're a woman now and you're beautiful now, all this crap. And then like they hook up. Like,
yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's not the best.
Yeah.
And I feel like the show tried to kind of get around it by making her older in certain scenarios, like older than she was in the book. When she met certain people or when she had sex with certain people, she was older in the show. But still, yeah, it's like you knew her as a child. I know she's not a child now when you're having sex, but it's definitely this kind of... It's weird. It's definitely weird, and... It's weird. So.
And like, I know there's a lot of gray area because I want to say like her and Benny were maybe like 5 or 6 years apart, and Beltic, I don't know, it just opens the door for like conversations about like, is it grooming? Because, you know, there's all this fixation on you're a child and you're a child prodigy. Do you want to sleep together? Like, I don't know.
What I know. In exchange for sex.
It's very troubling.
Yeah.
But anyways, just kind of before I forget, I want to talk a little bit more about Jolene. So also in the Twitter world, I was seeing some tweets and just people expressing how, you know, in some ways Jolene was I would say in the show, seeing her come to life, she's interesting. She's got some interesting one-liners and who she grows up to become. That was fascinating to see, but I do think in many instances we were kind of falling into this black friend trope or the black best friend trope.
Yeah, and definitely stereotypical portrayal too. Yeah,
like she's just so limited to the point where it's just like, why'd you even do this? You know, like, did you write her in so you could say, okay, fine, I'm not racist. Like, I have a black character.
And like, I get it was a different time, but there is such an emphasis on her being black too. It's mentioned so many times in the book. We're like, we get it. She's black. Is there anything else to her character but the fact that she's black? You know? So, I mean, and she does have facets of her that are incredibly interesting. She's very driven. She's very focused. She's very intelligent. I mean, we see her, now I'm getting the book and the show confused, because in the book when she comes back she's getting her master's in political science, and in the show she's working at a law firm, right? Yeah, so it's like we see her that, and she's I think both the show and the book highlight how she's really grown into this, like, I don't want to use the word self-possessed again, but self-possessed woman, and she's making her own mark on the world, and so like I like that part of her, but they really bog her down with a lot of kind of like stereotypical things as well. Yeah.
And just like this, so she's hypersexualized immediately from the gate, but then also this has been a thing, a tale as old as time, this fixation with like the perceived athleticism of black people.
Yeah.
And so, you know, of course, like, I don't know, and here's the thing, like, of course, there's black athletes who are great. Like, look at Serena Williams, one of the best athletes in the world. She happens to be a black woman. That's fine. I'm not contesting that at all. But I'm just saying, like, I felt like at some points with Jolene's character, it was someone who maybe didn't have or didn't even think to delve deeper into just creating a more, like, rounded,
well-developed character.
Yeah.
And for goodness sake, the scholarship she was offered to leave Methuen was a physical education scholarship. But like, she's getting her master's in political science. We know this is clearly a very intelligent girl, and I'm not saying majoring in physical education doesn't mean you're intelligent, but she just had other aspirations. But those were not even humored because they expected her to be something else. And I don't know if he's trying to write because that's what the times were. There were very limited opportunities for people of color, or if that's his own bias, like coloring his writing. I have no idea.
Yeah, and that's an interesting take on it. So overall, that was just, it was very troubling. I know, I would say in the show it was slightly executed better, but even still, like, you know, I'm still kind of confused on how their just rocky relationship at Methuen would later go on to be, you know, when she does hit her rock bottom, she's like, Jolene, she's going to be the one.
That's the person to dig me out of this mess. Like what? So something else I kind of wanted to talk about too was as Beth got older in the book, I guess, okay, so it kind of bothered me, like, she didn't get to have not a one positive sexual experience. And I say this because the author makes a point of putting her in these different situations, having sex with different characters, and so that's kind of like, that's part of her storyline, so that's why I'm bringing it up. But from the very first sexual experience she has was being assaulted by Jolene in the book, and then she has sex with the guy from her Russian class, and Beltic and Benny, and none of those guys does she really enjoy herself. Like, she talks about being very, like, I don't know, mechanical and boring, or just not all that pleasant. And so I'm just like, what was the point, I guess? And why could she not have any fulfilling sexual experience? Like, they were leading up Benny kind of like to be the only person she really had feelings for, like actual deeper than he's good at chess feelings. And so I thought that because they were like building up them having sex as well, and so I thought when they finally did, I was like, oh, she's gonna like have a person, but no, basically she was just saying that it wasn't that enjoyable either. And so I don't know, I thought I'm trying to figure out what was his point of incorporating those elements and making that such a large part of her storyline. What did you think about that?
I was just gonna say, I have to agree. Like, honestly, it's disturbing, frankly. And if we also take into account how much trauma this person, like Beth, from, you know, her whole life, she's dealt with so much trauma. And so to introduce this topic just for the sake of like adding some more negativity to her life is kind of weird to me. And just disturbing, disappointing, when you also take into account the whole like potential predatory issues and like grooming possibilities. It's even more disturbing, and it just feels wrong and weird. And I wish that wasn't the case. Like, if you're going to have these interactions, they weren't even really moving the story, to be honest.
They were just filler.
Yeah, like it was super random too. Like in the show, so in the show with Beltic, there's this whole thing with like, I guess his teeth were just not they were ideal when he was like younger. Then he gets some chess money, and there's a Frank Ocean lyric about this very thing. But he, you know, gets a bag and fixes his teeth, so to speak, right? And
that's Cardi B put it.
Oh yeah, Cardi too. Oh wow. Yeah, so there's lots of, it's a thing, and that's great, and I love that for him. So he fixes his teeth, he feels confident, and then in the show it's kind of like Beth is like, okay, wait, he's kind of cute, kind of thing. That's like, I felt like that was maybe implied a little bit. However, in the book it was so random because he comes in to help her as she's preparing to face off against Bulgov, and super randomly it's like all of a sudden they're sleeping together. And I was like, for why?
But for why though? And like, because I liked the friendship she was developing with the people in the chess world, like the twins, Benny, Beltic, like the way they were stepping up to help her. I appreciated that. So I almost don't feel like sex wasn't a necessary part of the equation for all of them. Like Benny, I could see it happening because they kind of started developing like a relationship outside of chess, and that was kind of like her other genuine human connection outside of Alma Wheatley. So I could see it there, but and someone too, I was on the Queen's Gambit subreddit, so I can't take credit for this, but I can't remember who said it. It was like the whole point of the show and the book, even, she's very much she goes through things alone. She learned how to play chess alone, essentially. I mean, she had Mr. Scheibel, but she spent a lot of time in her head practicing. And so the whole point of it was her realizing that she didn't have to be alone and she didn't have to do things alone. So learning to rely on the people around her, to count on the people around her, like Jolene being the one to pull her out of what she was going through, relying on the help from Beltic and Benny to finally beat Borgov. You know, so like just realizing, they were saying too, because like chess is often thought of as like a solitary game, but you know, so anyway, the person who wrote this said it much more eloquently than I am right now, but I really liked that idea, and I liked that there was a friendship. So I almost feel like her having sex with them just kind of like, what was the point? Like, why couldn't it have just been this friendship where he genuinely wants to help her succeed? Because, like, instead of being bitter that she beat him, which he wasn't. Beltic was never, he wasn't bitter. But why couldn't it just be that, like, he recognizes her talent and wants to help her? Why does he also have to want to sleep with her?
Right. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that, but that really checks out, too, because when you take into account the very ending when she's beating Bogov and you get that group phone call.
I love that scene so much.
Cinematic beauty. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think a lot of the issues that I have, and as we're talking about it, it's just, it's always it's a delicate game when you have a male writer writing a female perspective, and it just is because of, you know, just the history in this world. And
speaking to that really quickly, and we're not trying to like pound Walter Tevis into the ground at all, you know, that's not what we're doing. We're just, what we're here to do. We're here to talk. Yep. These are our feelings about it. You are welcome to disagree, and we'd love to have a conversation about that too. Like, you know, but something else that just bothered me was, so after her and Benny have sex for the first time, the next night Benny goes to a poker game and she gets really mad about that. And please tell me if I'm missing something, but I could not understand why she was so mad. Like, for those of you who haven't read the book, I basically just summed it up. They sleep together. The next night he is going to a poker game and she doesn't know how to play poker, and she asks if she can come along. He says sure, but that she can't talk because it's a poker game, like they're betting on it. Like, I don't know, it wasn't like a casual thing. He was like playing for rent money. And so she went and she's like really pissed off at him for not telling her that he had the poker game, and then she gets so mad while she's there that she leaves. And then he comes back and they end up having sex again the next day, but then she tells him she's still mad, and they have like a conversation about it. Yeah. But I really did not understand why she was so angry. And then that scene almost made me mad at the author, because I'm like, why are you trying to make her look like you're trying to make her look, quote, overly emotional, but there's nothing to be emotional about. Like, you're just making her look, I feel like that's not in Beth's character. Just because they had sex she didn't even care about. I don't think Beth would care that he's going to a poker game. He just put her in this very like stereotypical emotional woman role, and I didn't like it.
That's an interesting take. Yeah.
Am I missing something?
No. Yeah. No, you're right. I guess for me, when I was reading that, I interpreted a lot of like her upset with Benny. That doesn't make sense. Anyways, like her issues with Benny that time being that just like she felt like he had talked her into going to New York because she didn't want to go. She just got her house in Kentucky or Kansas. One of those. You're right, Kentucky. Okay, yeah, in Kentucky. She has her house. She doesn't want to go. He talks her into going. She goes, and she's like, "You're not showing me any attention. Like, you don't." She thought that there's gonna be a couch, there's a blow-up bed, and granted, his whole focus was like, "You're here to learn about chess. That's it." And that's at least how things started. But she was just like, and I felt like this was more touched on in the book more so than in the show, because in the show I kind of felt the same way, but in the book, just like he doesn't tell her when his friends show up. That's completely out of the blue. So I thought that she felt like she was getting sidelined. And he just didn't care. Like, he didn't take into account her being there at all, because he's also, I felt like they were kind of like mirror images in some ways. Yeah. Like, they were each other.
They're very reserved people, but then almost frustrated with the other for being so reserved.
Exactly. Like, they're very solitary, isolated people trying to connect. And so I think that's part of why they didn't really work out. But yeah, I think she was just irritated that he wasn't giving her, you know, the gold pedestal treatment
that she was used to getting.
Yeah, but to your point of her being overly emotional, I have to agree, because like there's such, especially in the book, like the language used to describe her, I'm like, first of all, she's a human being, like who's also dealt with so much in her life, and she's breaking through she's literally breaking boundaries. Is that what it is? Breaking barriers. There you go. She's breaking barriers. Like, you know, she's the first female chess player to really make it big. She's dealing with a lot. Of course she has the right to be upset. She has the right to cry. She has the right to be joyous and to celebrate. Be competitive. And to be competitive. And there's nothing wrong with that. There should be no negative adjectives being attributed to, you know, the way that she's expressing, because humans express, you know. I have to agree. Yeah, I thought that was just so, it took me out.
Yeah, he made it a point, if anyone hasn't read the book, to like the only two emotions Beth could feel in this entire book apparently to the author were fury and annoyance.
Yeah,
with everyone and everything at all times. And I'm like, again, while it's perfectly fine to be furious when you lose, it's perfectly fine to be annoyed with making a mistake. We have all been there, but can let's explore more of her character, because I know there has to be everything she's gone through and is going through. I know there's got to be more there than fury and annoyance with everything all the time. Like he used the phrase "she was furious" so many times, so many times. So it just got tiring.
It did. And also it was always negative. Like, being competitive wasn't seen as a positive thing a lot of times in describing her, and I think that was a disservice, because I feel like her competitive nature, it's what like kept her going sometimes.
It drove her to be the best.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how you be the best. That's how you be the GOAT.
No, and seriously, and that too, you just reminded me of something. Not only was she furious, she hated everyone. That was another phrase that he always used. Anytime someone made a move on her in a game that she wasn't expecting, or maybe, you know, if the game went any way than other than her flat, like killing them in the first, 10, 12, 15 moves, it would be Beth was furious. She hated him. Yeah. Whoever she was playing. Hated him. That was another phrase that kept coming up, and it was like, okay.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, this is another vote in favor of the show over the book for me, just because, for that reason, like, maybe you remember, I forget the name of the actress who plays Beth. It's like Anya Alexander.
Oh, Anya Taylor-Joy, I think.
Anya Taylor-Joy. Phenomenal. Just phenomenal performance. But specifically, I think a lot of the tension that Beth's feeling during these matches, that was all seen on her face. You know, this is like, we've got these medium close-ups or just, they're closing in on her face, and you can see her feeling like, oh crap, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I wasn't expecting them to do that. Or her being like, dang, I don't want to lose. And all that's communicated via acting. Yeah. Whereas in the book, it's just these contrived. It was not for me.
And maybe that's part of it. Like, we had to be told so often what she was feeling instead of being able to see it. But that's true for every book. So there's ways to go about it where it doesn't feel like the same two emotions essentially over and over. Yeah. And I just want to talk about Beth and what she's gone through really quickly. Like, it's so hard, because it seems like anytime she started to get happy or comfortable, it was taken away from her. And so, like, losing her mom and then forming a relationship with Mrs. Wheatley, her adoptive mom, and then losing her too. Like, I can't imagine what she was going through with all of that. Like the feeling of being left constantly. Yeah. Even like Harry, I mean, I don't know if she didn't seem that affected about it. That's his first name, right? Harry Beltic? Was that his first name?
Is either Harry or Henry.
Henry. Shoot, now I can't remember. We're going to call him Beltic. But like him leaving, or he came and helped her and then he left. I don't know if she was that torn up about it, but people constantly leaving. Or even when she had to leave Methuen, like she probably didn't, I know she didn't love it there, but it was a place she had become comfortable. Right. She had Jolene, and then she had to leave that too. And so it's like she has no stability.
I guess to that point, that poses the question I want to ask you. Do you feel like her reliance on various substances was a trope, or do you feel like it served the story in some purpose, or spoke to kind of like what she was going through?
I think it did speak to what she's going through. And I want to say, like, the way in which she was introduced to these substances kind of breaks the trope, because it wasn't like her seeking them out. The pills were given to her. She had no idea what they were. The alcohol was offered to her by Mrs. Wheatley. She had no idea what, like, the effect it was going to have on her, kind of thing. So, and it's really interesting because when she's being interviewed for, is it Life magazine, I think?
Yeah.
And the journalist is talking to her, and she says something about, like, mania and genius going hand in hand or something. And it's really interesting because outside of this book and Book Solid, I had been reading, like, some articles lately, and it was just a coincidence, but it's kind of, that level of intelligence is kind of a blessing and a curse. Because I've read, like, basically when you have that kind of mental capacity, you need constant stimulation, otherwise it can lead to substance abuse or, you know, mental health issues and things like that. And so I just think it was really interesting because it seemed to me she sank furthest into her addiction when she wasn't playing or when she wasn't finding other outlets. I'm trying to remember what the catalyst was, if it was after Mrs. Wheatley died, when she kind of really fell into alcoholism.
Yeah.
And so she wasn't playing anymore. She hadn't played for months. She hadn't practiced. She couldn't focus. And then when Jolene came and helped her, she just, like, gave her new outlets, basically. She was like, you're gonna exercise, you're gonna work on your, you know, just giving her different ways. I feel like I'm kind of rambling.
No, you're good.
But yeah, but, like, just giving her different ways to occupy her brain.
That's fascinating.
And don't quote me, guys. I'm not a doctor. I'm just telling you something I read, and I just thought it was interesting because it seemed to correlate to the story here.
Yeah. I didn't think about it that way. You're changing, because I was going into this thinking one way, but you bring up a good point in saying that. And I think this, because a lot of times when we see this, I guess, trope or, you know, this common thing in media and literature, it's the character who seeks these things out to deal with what they're dealing with. But the fact that these things kind of fell into her lap and then it happens to her, that's just tragic, you know? So yeah, I just felt like it was definitely told differently. I do think it is definitely a trope, as, you know, that tweet I was talking about earlier brought up. But I think that addiction is real. You know, people are definitely going through this, struggling with it. I think the fact that she is a genius and, like, this child prodigy coping with isolation and abandonment, like, these things are possible. It can happen. You know, it's not, you know, just because it's a trope doesn't mean it's a bad one, so to speak. Or
yeah, because I'll say I don't disagree with you. I definitely think it is a trope. And even when I first saw the promo picture for it on Netflix, but I do think the execution was well done.
I agree, and I think that there was kind of like a lesson, or at least she was able, I like too that she was kind of able to work through this on her own. There were multiple times where she's like, especially towards the end, where, I mean, she was drinking like cases of wine at this point, and gin, and she came to the realization, she's like, I can't think, like, my judgment is cloudy, I can't even, because that's a big thing throughout both the book and the show, is her being able to visualize these pieces, these chess pieces, and the moves that she wants to do and execute, and the stuff that she studied, and she does this all in her brain because she's a genius. Of course she does. But, you know, as alcohol is introduced and the tranquilizers, you know, she can't, it's literally stifling her ability. So she decides, kind of, without like without it being explicitly stated, she comes to this kind of understanding that it's one or the other.
Yeah.
You know?
Or that if I don't do something about this now, like, I worry I worry that I ever will. Or if I ever will. And I like to, it's like the show showed this more than the book, but, like, the journey to her, like, recovery and sobriety from what she was going through is not a perfect process. And in the show, like, they made a point of when she was in Russia, and she was trying to refrain from taking her tranquilizers, and we see that moment where she opens it and she's thinking about it and then dumps them in the sink, but then later tells someone, like, then I went downstairs and tried to buy more. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not all of a sudden, you know, she got Jolene and she started exercising and she's perfectly fine, you know, like, this is something she's going to constantly have to work through, and just, like, highlighting that you know, it's not a perfect process.
That's a good point, because, like, even, you know, she's very self-aware. Like, there's that point, I think she's in San Francisco at this point, and she's like, I'm 19 years old, but I feel like I'm 40.
Yeah.
You know, and even when she's with Benny, so Benny's pretty much straight edge, or at least he teaches her to be that way. And so that period that she's in New York, she is. She doesn't drink, she doesn't take her pills, or I think in the book she might, or she thought about it. Yeah. But, you know, she's all right. I'm straight edge too. But then, of course, we know she kind of, like, relapses. And so I felt like it was a very real depiction. And, you know, it just kind of, I guess, it highlights and speaks to all that she's dealing with. And it's just tragic. You know, it broke my heart in both the book and the show. Definitely the book, like the detail that I would say right before, as she's preparing to defeat Bolgoff, when she kind of hits maybe like her lowest point, when she's by herself. She's just bought the house from we didn't talk about Mr. Wheatley.
We didn't talk about Mrs. Wheatley either.
Yeah. All that you need to know if you haven't read the book or seen the show yet is that he is irredeemable trash.
He gets this episode's award for irredeemable trash. You know, we do this every episode. Not intentionally, it just comes up, but it definitely goes to him.
Yeah, and you know, I was wondering. I was reading it, and I'm like, okay, like there's people who definitely like irritate me, but are they irredeemable? Because I'm seeing redemption. No, Mr. Wheatley, he's trash.
He's just the worst. He doesn't even care that his wife dies.
Yeah, like what? You married her, you adopted a child with her, abandoned them both. She dies. You didn't even care to know how she dies. You didn't even care to.
Yeah.
I could
and
go
then
on.
telling Beth to just she can have the house and she keeps up the payments, and then coming out of literally nowhere
the woodworks
and saying, actually, I didn't say that, you must be mistaken. What?
Just disgusting, despicable excuse of a human being.
Truly.
And he does not get better.
And really quick, I want to talk to you. How do you feel about Mrs. Wheatley and their relationship?
Yeah, I think that was definitely a very interesting, well-crafted, well-articulated relationship with a lot of nuance and grit to it, because on one end, it's beautiful, right? Like, I love that for Beth. She finally has someone,
a person.
Yes, and you get those freaking, the montages in the show where they're, like, living their best life, and they're on the plane.
And she would come and watch her during, like, she wouldn't just travel with her, but she'd actually watch her play.
Yes, and she knows the names of other grandmasters. Like, she's paying attention. She cares. Finally, someone cares about Beth. I felt like, yes, Shibel did, but, like, someone who cares and is present with her. But she
enabled some negative behavior in Beth. Like, okay, you know, I guess trying to give her a sip of the martini was innocent enough in a way, but, like, I feel like she noticed some of Beth's self-destructive behavior, but didn't kind of put herself in any position to do anything about it. Like, when Beth stayed over with the guy from her college, and, you know, Mrs. Wheatley seemed really hesitant about that. She didn't think it was a good idea, and Beth's just like, I'm not gonna get pregnant, and that was the end of the conversation, and then she didn't come home for 2 days. Or she noticed, like, when she gave Beth her first beer and she, like, chugged it and then another one, you could tell that Mrs. Wheatley was, like, kind of side-eyeing it, like, okay, this seems like it could be an issue, but then again, she didn't do anything to stop it. And I don't even know if she had the capacity to, because she definitely seemed like she had her own set of issues.
And that's what I was just about to bring up. I completely agree. So, like, you know, she's enabling a lot of this behavior. And there were times, both in the show, I was shocked because I'm like, my mom would never, like, specifically the scene when she literally tells her mom on the phone, her mom's like, oh, you know, something kind of like a offhanded comment about sleeping with a guy. And she's like, oh, I did last night. Yeah. I was like, pump the brakes.
And then her mom's like, well, I guess chess isn't the only thing in the world.
Yeah. I was just like, whoa, that's interesting. I imagine
they're more like friends.
Yeah.
Like mother, daughter. I mean, there's nothing wrong with sharing that with your mom. Like, you know, like, I'm not throwing shade at that, but it was just like surprising how casually I think she said it.
And there was and that's the thing. So it was kind of like, I think the boundary between mother-daughter and BFFs was getting blurred, and it was good and bad, largely bad towards the end. But I think what you were saying towards the end is exactly it. Like, I think Mrs. Wheatley, because she was also going through her own issues, she wasn't in a place to really, I guess, discipline Beth in the way that Beth maybe needed to. And not even, I don't think discipline's the right word, but just kind of like
guide her, maybe.
Yeah, and kind of recognize some of this destructive, self-destructive behavior, and maybe start to correct that early on, because she herself maybe was dealing with alcoholism from the scenes of it. And, you know, she's also dealing with maybe like this divorce ? Husband just dips. Like,
and it they say this in the show, but I don't think they say it in the book about like how Mr. and Mrs. Wheatley had a child before Beth. They don't elaborate, but they don't have a child anymore, so I assume they passed. So like going through that, and and so.
Yeah, and then also we know there's like a bit of a financial burden on them.
Yeah.
There's this awful, disgusting comment that Mrs. Wheatley makes that made me rethink her whole character when Beth suggests
only colored women get jobs or something like that.
I was like, Miss Girl, as far as I know, you guys can benefit from another income in the house.
So you shouldn't be so proud. Yeah. Oh, yeah. She says the only girls your age who have who work are colored.
Yeah. And I was like, ew, first of all, what's wrong?
For those of you like, it's the time. We know, but still.
Still, yeah. Also, screw that. Like, recently I watched that show, Hollywood, on Netflix, and without spoiling it too much, and even, Soraya, you mentioned Hamilton. I'm here for this idea of reimagining history, guys. It's 2021 now. Happy New Year, by the way. But, like, we've seen it. We know the history. And guess what? We're going to study it, and you'll learn about the history in school. But I'm very interested in these alternative takes on the past that Bridgerton on Netflix. I haven't watched it yet.
That allow for, let's say it, inclusivity.
Yes. And I know they were trying with, like, I guess making Ferguson black in the show, but just like, yeah, I'm just tired of it. I don't care anymore if you say it was the time. That's my hot take now.
So moving into the end game here. That's my attempt at some chess humor. Is there anything else that like really stood out to you about the book or any of the characters?
I do have just something super minor that stood out to me, both in the book and the show. So there's a point right when Beth gets adopted and she's seen the house for the first time, and then she sees her room for the first time, and I loved that because for me, you guys probably don't know this, but I have some siblings, and so I'm a middle child, and just like this concept of like having your own room, having your own space
with a door you can lock.
Yes, and your own bed, and that I've been there, and so that was like a treat, that whole moment with Beth. I was like, I love this for her, and like she's just so grateful, and it was a good moment.
And her like genuine disbelief, like this is all mine.
Yeah,
and that was a very sizable bedroom.
I know they hooked her up with the master.
It wasn't some tiny little thing either.
Yeah, she had a suite.
Oh, really quick. Okay. Maybe this just went over my head. I mean, I guess I get what they were hinting at, but I feel like they could have gone about it in a different way. Was what happened with her and Towns in the show. Like, in the book, she, obviously, she really likes him. And then we never hear from him again. She runs into him in Vegas still. They go to her room. He does the article on her. They play chess. He doesn't try to, like, there's no moment where they, like, almost kiss and nobody comes in. So that only happens in the show. In the book, there's none of that. And then she leaves, and we never see or hear from him again. This guy she had a big fat crush on. This guy she contemplated losing for on purpose. Maybe that was just in the show. And then in the show, it was all still very unclear as well. Like, everyone's trying to say that, what was his name? Tony? The other guy who came
Oh,
in?
yeah.
I can't remember his name, but everyone's like, oh, that's obviously, like, his partner or somebody. But it was just all very confusing because he kind of was acting like he was going to kiss Beth there.
Yeah.
And then that person came in, and then it was just, like... And then I don't know, it was confusing.
I think it wasn't executed in the way that... It was an opportunity missed. Like, Towns was a fascinating character, both in the book and the show. The actor who played him, just interesting stuff there. And genuine. He was, like, a genuinely nice person who's not... Because I think this is the first time she's playing in Kentucky. This is, like, the first time she's playing actual chess players in a tournament. And she was dealing with so much, like, passive comments and just, like... sexist, misogynistic undertones, and he's just like, you're a talented chess player, that's how I'm gonna address you, I don't care about the fact that you're a girl or whatever. And he was just cool, and so I was like, oh, I love him. But then it's just like I wish that they would have I like how in the show they kept him in longer, and so from what I understand, I think he flies out to Russia.
Yeah. Like that in and of itself, what?
Wait, what? Yeah, I forgot. I completely forgot about that. But at least they were trying to give us some closure and like tie him in a little bit, because you're right. I mean, in the book, you know, he's this important figure in Beth's mind, and then all of a sudden he's gone. And so it's just like, why did we do this? And then in the show, if you were going to approach LGBTQ plus representation in that time period, if you were going to do it, do it.
Yeah, exactly. Why did you hint around it and you left people more confused than anything?
Yeah.
Just be direct.
Yeah, like with what we were talking about earlier, like now's the time. You know, change history. If you're going to introduce this topic, I love that, as you should.
Yeah.
But act on it. Don't just, okay, well, here's a little bit, here's a little tease.
And you'll figure it out for yourselves. Because people are not. People are very confused. People
yeah. And I'm
what?
people.
I'm people. People is me. Truly.
But yeah, I agree. Towns was interesting. I wish he had more screen time.
I do too. And they actually, like, so it's funny because in the book, when Beth meets him, she describes him as looking like a movie star.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and he very much, the actor who plays him very much has, like, movie star of that era vibes. Very 50s movie star vibes. I was like, oh, that's good casting.
I agree, yeah. And, yeah, I guess one more thing with Towns is... So there is an age difference. I just can't remember how much, but it does seem considerable, because he was one of the ones to make a comment of, oh, you're a woman now, when he saw her in Vegas.
Yeah, he even said, like, oh, you've gotten attractive or something.
Which, pump the brakes.
So you're calling her ugly.
Yeah, like, that's rude, but okay. But, in a way, I'm kind of glad nothing ever did happen, because... if it did happen, then it's like, are you a predator? Question, like, were you thinking about this when she was, I don't know, 13 years old, 14 years old? Just got her period.
It's the same weird, like, Beltic situation. Yeah.
Because I know he was, like, younger, but he was, I mean, to make a comment like you've grown up.
Yeah, I feel like he had to have been at least 17 when they met the first time, when she was, like, 12.
I think in the book he was in college.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's not good, guys.
Yeah, that's not.
In the book, she was... So when she got adopted, she was 15 in the show, but in the book, she was 12. Because she was in 7th grade.
Oh, no.
So she was even younger when she first met Beltic and Towns, and the twins don't exist in the book, but yeah.
Yeah, they made him in college, I'm pretty sure, in the book. In the show, maybe not, though.
It's a hard pass.
Yeah, that's a hell no for me. But, at any rate...
So, I'm sure you could tell from this hour plus that we've been talking, but you know, when we do a book versus show, or book and show, book and movie episode comparison, we always end it by asking which we preferred. I don't think we have to ask each other. I feel it's pretty apparent. I think it's safe to say we much prefer the show.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you haven't yet, I highly recommend that. I'm not sure what to recommend to you, because, you know, we watched the show first. Maybe read the book, maybe watch the show. But either way, definitely check them out. As you know, we've had a lot of thoughts, and we're very curious to hear yours as well.
Yeah, I would say if you're only going to pick one, because some people don't care to do both and to read both or watch whatever.
The book.
Yeah. If you're going to only pick one, watch the show. Hands down, 110%. That's the way to go.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, I don't know that I'd recommend the book.
So as always, it has been a pleasure discussing this for you guys today. We are so excited to be back with season 2. We're going to be back on our bi-weekly schedule. I know before we went on hiatus, we were doing kind of our Spooktober, so we had an episode like every week and then some bonuses, but we're going back to bi-weekly. So we'll see you in 2 weeks, where we're going to be discussing Leave the World Behind, and we look forward to chatting with you.
Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today. For more updates, you can be sure to follow us on Twitter at BookSolidPod, on Instagram at BookSolidPodcast, like us on Facebook at BookSolidPodcast, and also join our group.